damage going through the Strait. The U.S. president going on to talk about a press conference that will be held by the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, their defense secretary, as well as the chair of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, on Tuesday morning. But it's clear the U.S. president has been ratcheting up his language, even as there has been an escalation in what is supposed to be a ceasefire.
Kimberly, thanks for that. Kimberly Hackett there at the White House. Let's take this on here in the studio with the retired US General Mark Kimmitt, also former Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. General Kimmitt, welcome. So pretty evident here that this ceasefire is being pushed dangerously, isn't it? Do you think it's going to spiral?
Not sure. Ceasefires traditionally break. They aren't very well observed. We've seen a ceasefire numerous times in Ukraine and Russia. And the real question, is it going to spiral to the level it was where the fighting was about a month ago? Probably not. I would suspect we'll have this low level back and forth for a while, unless there's a significant attack on an American ship that results in casualties or a sinking.
But in a sense, forgive me for interrupting, but in a sense, isn't President Trump and the U.S. military made that more likely by engaging in this operation to escort ships out of the Strait, because they well know that Iran isn't happy with that?
No, that's true. I mean, if we had not done Project Freedom, we would be sort of in a stasis right now where we wouldn't have an increase of any kind. But in this case, the United States has taken the risk to try to do the humanitarian escorts. We are seeing what Iran is doing in response. They've declared a new security architecture in the Gulf, which includes taking UAE waters all the way down to Fujairah and Ras Al Khaimah.
Yeah, we saw that on that map.
Yeah, just unprecedented. So it's almost as if the Iranians are goading us into restarting the fight.
Right, and so is that more what it's about? Not so much a humanitarian mission, as the president put it, but more about pushing Iran into a corner and extracting that leverage that it has of the Strait?
Well, it certainly may be the case that that's what Iran interprets, but I actually think that this is an effort by the United States to get these ships through, if for no other reason than to avoid international criticism, if not for humanitarian reasons.
You mentioned Project Freedom, as President Trump has called it. The timeline of this war is enshrined in this naming convention, isn't it? From epic fury, then to economic fury, now to Project Freedom. Does that timeline, do you think, perhaps demonstrate a search for direction that has never been abundantly clear to the U.S. administration from the start?
I would look at it a different way. While it may look like they're floundering about, fundamentally, they're trying to use all elements of national power. It isn't just military, but it's also diplomatic and economic. And look, I think information is a component of that. That's why we call it DIME, diplomatic, information, military, economic. It is clear to me that Project Freedom is very much information, in the sense that we're trying to convince our allies that have been miffed that we didn't inform them and they think this is an illegal war, that there is actually some humanitarian issues here, if no other reason than to, if it's not humanitarian, it's self-interest to get this oil out of the Strait, get the fertilizer and such out of the Strait, that we're not just, that this thing is not unambiguously bad and it's not unambiguously offensive, that there are some rational reasons that our allies should be joining us.
And one of those rational reasons is, of course, trying to move the dial in the negotiations. Do you think what is happening now in the Gulf, I mean, it doesn't really look as if what's happening in the Gulf is bringing the sides closer together, does it?
No, but it's remember, this is all being done in the context of the 14-point plan that Iran has delivered through the Pakistanis to the United States, and there has been a response by the United States, not very encouraging response, but perhaps this will just sort of cause the issues to go back and forth to the point where they can be narrowed down so that we can get to negotiations. Because what we're doing now is negotiating about negotiations.
The two sides, as I say, a long way apart, especially on the nuclear issue. Can that chasm be bridged, do you think? If Iran yields a bit, will the United States?
You know, it's funny, in that 14-point program, they talked a little bit about the nuclear program, but what they were unambiguously unwilling to discuss is their ballistic missile program. So it may well be that we can make some progress on the nuclear program if we set aside the ballistic missile program. As you remember the other day when you were talking to Dr. Danya Taffer, she said, in this region, the big issue is the ballistic missile program, not the nuclear program.
Right.
So it could well be that if we set aside the issue of ballistic missiles, as has been done in previous nuclear negotiations, that the Iranians would be willing to talk about this issue of the nuclear program, primarily, first of all, what they're going to do with the 250 kilograms of enriched uranium, and number two, will there be a limit put on the Iranians above zero but below 3.67 that both sides could live with? Let's hope that could be the case.
All right. We'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for that, General Commit. Thank you. Now, Israeli attacks are continuing to target southern Lebanon despite a ceasefire that came into effect last month. At least 2 people have been killed in airstrikes in the town of Shahor in Tyre district. The Israeli army earlier launched airstrikes in the towns of Debal and Kana after issuing forced displacement warnings to 4 villages. Israeli forces have launched expanded strikes in Lebanon since early March, killing more than 2,600 people. Hezbollah says a ceasefire is non-existent in Lebanon, and armed resistance, they say, will continue. Well, Israel's war on Lebanon has displaced more than 1 million people, as we've been reporting, but it's also disrupted the education of 250,000 children right across the country. Hundreds of schools are now closed or used as shelters for the displaced. Rory Challenge has been speaking to one family in Beirut.
This war is a catastrophe for Lebanon's kids, and I've come to speak to a family about it. This building is a technical college in Beirut, but it's not a technical college right now. It's actually sheltering about 2,000 of the 1 million or so people displaced by Israel's bombs from their homes in southern Lebanon and Beirut. So I want to make an introduction. This is Mariam and 2 of her kids, Zainab at the back in the orange, and Ahmed here at the front. They're preparing for exams starting tomorrow, but how can you do exams when everything is gone?
The internet here is really weak. When online lessons started, we were still under warplanes and bombardment. I only have one phone for all of them. 3 children. Their classes are often scheduled at the same time, so they simply can't attend properly.
10-year-old Zainab is doing her best.
I like studying. I'm studying on my phone and getting ready for exams. It really upsets me that I'm not going to school because of the war. I don't really understand online lessons. Sometimes I can't hear anything or connect.
Zainab's mum thinks under these conditions, exams are unfair. They should be delayed. Indeed, the numbers are dire. 339 schools were closed because they were in war zones. At least 430 schools, colleges and universities are shut because, well, they're now homes for the displaced. The education of 250,000 kids has been disrupted. That was UNESCO's count from early April. Things have got a little better according to the Education Ministry, but still only 55% of Lebanese kids are studying in schools.
We are still hearing many complaints saying that, what about these who left their homes? Where will you do the exams? We want to make sure that the exam centers are in safe places. And we know that in many areas in the south, there's nothing called as safe. Not doing an exam for everybody is not the choice. So we want to cut the problem into chunks to be able to deal with it.
As Lebanon knows from earlier wars and as the world knows from COVID, when children face a long disruption to their educations, the effects are felt for years to come. Rory Challenge, Al Jazeera in Beirut.
Now to other news. Israeli forces have shot and killed a 26-year-old Palestinian in the occupied West Bank. Naif Samaro was among a number of people shot during a military raid on Nablus. He was travelling to visit his wife, who was in labour with their firstborn son. Perry Wilton has the story.
A father, never to be. This is the body of 26-year-old Naif Samaro. He was carried by witnesses of his shooting in a desperate bid to get him to hospital, the same hospital where his wife was in labour with their child. But it was too late. His wife was still in labour when she was told her husband had been killed. Her mother left to face the aftermath without a son-in-law.
A father passes away on the first day, and his son enters the world the following day. He never saw his child, never rejoiced of his arrival, nor shared the joy of his birth. It was supposed to be the father who welcomed his son, but death came first, and so it was us who received the little one.
The shooting happened during an Israeli military raid in the city of Nablus in the occupied West Bank. The Israeli army issued a statement saying a number of Palestinians threw stones at its troops. Then it said it responded with, quote, crowd dispersal measures, and later with live fire to remove the threat and disperse the gathering. This is when Naif Samaro was killed. The Palestinian Health Ministry says Israeli forces shot 4 others with live rounds, 2 of whom were children. After tear gas was fired in the area, at least 10 others were taken to hospital. Funerals like Samaro's are increasingly commonplace in the occupied territory, carrying a would-be father to an early grave.
Only yesterday he was waiting with bated breath to know the time of delivery. He was longing for his son speaking to him while he was still in his mother's womb. The child knows nothing of what awaits him in this world, and now he arrives only to find his father gone. Perhaps he heard his father's voice from the womb, but in this life he will never find him.
Now a new family will have to face the violence without a father. A firstborn son, a child he never had the chance to hold. Perry Wilton, Al Jazeera.
At least 2 people have been killed after a car drove into pedestrians in a busy shopping area in the eastern city of Leipzig. Several other people were injured. The driver was detained at the scene and later identified as a 33-year-old German citizen. Officials believe he acted alone and are treating the incident as a deliberate ramming. Medics are working to evacuate a number of people with symptoms of Hantavirus, respiratory illness, from a cruise ship after a suspected outbreak killed 3 passengers. The MV Hondius was travelling from Argentina to Antarctica when it requested help and is now anchored off Cape Verde. The passengers who died were from the Netherlands and Germany. A British man is in intensive care in South Africa. No one is being allowed to disembark the ship, but the World Health Organization said the public health risk is low. Famida Miller has more now from Cape Town.
South African authorities have confirmed that there's been an outbreak of a severe respiratory illness. Now that's after at least 6 people were affected by what is thought to be a Hantavirus aboard a cruise ship traveling from Argentina to the Cape Verde Islands off the West African coast. Now, 2 of the people affected by the virus were evacuated and brought to South Africa. They were admitted to a hospital in Johannesburg, where one of the victims has passed on, and the other continues to be in intensive care in a Johannesburg hospital. Now, the first victim who has died, she's believed to be the wife of a man who also died from this virus. His body is believed to be on the island of St. Helena. There are believed to be at least 3 other people affected by this, and tests have been done. Laboratory tests have confirmed in South Africa that one of those victims did in fact have Hantavirus. Now, it's a virus that is usually spread from rodents, contact with their feces or urine, it's quite rare that it spreads from human to human. And this is what is concerning for the World Health Organization, which says it's investigating what is going on. It's assisting the operators of the cruise ship to potentially evacuate other people. It's not clear whether or not that cruise ship will continue to sail on to the Canary Islands, and also if more people will be evacuated, perhaps to the Cape Verde, to a hospital there. But there is support from the World Health Organization and, of course, South African authorities keeping an eye on that patient in intensive care in Johannesburg. And they say that they are concerned following the confirmation of Hantavirus, but again, are keeping an eye on developments. Famida Miller, Al Jazeera, Cape Town.
Russia has announced a unilateral two-day ceasefire with Ukraine starting on Friday. It will coincide with celebrations marking the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. Moscow typically marks Victory Day with a military parade. Russia has warned of retaliatory strikes if Ukraine violates the ceasefire. Well, early results from India's state assembly elections indicate significant surprises in constituencies that have long been considered strongholds. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP appears to have taken control in West Bengal for the first time, while a party led by an actor-turned-politician has secured victory in Tamil Nadu. The lead-up to the elections was marked by controversy, including allegations that over 9 million voters were removed from the electoral rolls. Minal Fernandez says this.
Celebrations in West Bengal state as results poured in from one of India's most fraught assembly elections. The governing Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, pulled out all the stops to campaign here in West Bengal, the country's second largest state assembly with 294 seats. And its efforts appear to have paid off.
We feel persecuted by this Trinamool government. Any protester faced death threats. False cases were slapped on them. That's the reason we want a new government in 2026.
There was heavy security with tens of thousands of personnel deployed across the state. The state's governing All India Trinamool Congress and its three-time Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee have accused the central government and election authorities of manipulating the election, charges both have dismissed. Changes to the electoral roll stripped millions of their right to vote, stoking tensions. Even so, turnout was a record. More than 9 million people were removed in what activists described as a rushed and arbitrary exercise before the election. Naeem Mullah is among them. The 42-year-old tailor says he's voted many times before, but he, along with his brother, have been removed because their father was named as the father of more than 6 people.
We are Indian citizens and we love our country. Therefore, we feel sad if we are unable to carry out our constitutional duty. The vote is an important constitutional right, and snatching this away without giving us an opportunity for redress is a random, arbitrary act.
Across the country in Tamil Nadu, the story resembles the many blockbusters that actor-turned-Chief Minister hopeful Vijay has starred in. His 2-year-old party, the Tamilaha Vetri Kazhagam, has emerged ahead of the two main political parties. The BJP has returned to power in Assam with its Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma heading for a second consecutive term. The state assembly results do not have a direct bearing on national politics, but will allow Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his party to strengthen their influence. Minal Fernandez, Al Jazeera.
You're watching Al Jazeera, a reminder of our top stories this hour. And the United Arab Emirates says it's intercepted a number of missiles from Iran. A large fire has broken out at a petroleum facility in the port city of Fujairah, injuring 3 Indian nationals. But Iran says it has no plan to target the UAE. 9 ships have passed through the Strait of Hormuz since the US president announced a plan to guide stranded vessels in the Gulf through the waterway. US CENTCOM Central Command said it would support the operation with a number of aircraft, warships and 15,000 military personnel. At least 2 people have been killed in Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon, despite a ceasefire that came into effect last month. Hezbollah says it will continue its operations against Israeli forces. Now, US President Donald Trump has posted on social media about reported attacks on commercial vessels in the Strait. He said Iran has taken some shots at unrelated nations with respect to the ship movement. Project Freedom, including a South Korean cargo ship. Perhaps it's time, he says, for South Korea to come and join the mission. We shot down several small boats, or as they like to call them, fast boats. It's all they have left. Other than the South Korean ship, there has been, at this moment, no damage going through the Strait. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff Dan Kane will have a news conference, and that'll be tomorrow morning. Let's bring in Mike Fifley, who's founder and president of Off the Record Strategies and a US national security analyst, and joins us now from Washington, D.C. Mark, great to have you with us.
Hello,
you've
David.
often spoken of Donald Trump timing major moves on a weekend, and so it was last night with the announcement of Project Freedom. Is there no more calculation than that in this, do you think?
I think it's that. Of course, Mr. Trump focuses on the openings of the markets. He's done that several times now during this blockade. At the same time, he's also trying to test the Iranian chokehold. It's a very narrow passage. He thinks he can get leverage, and it's likely he can, if a significant amount of ships can make it through during this Project Freedom tactic. And that way that he can get leverage that can then be used against the Iranians as ships get through that have the U.S. support, while the Iranian ships are unable to move its way through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's more of a tactical way to test the process for Mr. Trump as he continues to find leverage in this sequencing battle that he has right now with Tehran. Tehran, of course, wants to open up the Strait of Hormuz to their vessels and all vessels, and then talk about the nuclear issue at a future date to be named later. Mr. Trump says, no, give over your nukes now, and then we will also open up the Strait of Hormuz. So that's what's going on right now. It's a battle for who can get the most pressure on the other one to move the negotiation forward in a positive way.
But is it likely to bridge the chasm between the two sides, especially on the nuclear issue? Can they narrow that gap?
So remains to be seen. So all of this pressure is having significant impact on both sides. The Iranians are seeing enormous pressure on their economy. Of course, they get about 30 to 40% of their country's wealth from oil that is unable to move to market. That has had a significant impact on their economy, 50% plus inflation. The numbers of the rial right now are 1.84 million of their rial to a U.S. dollar. Their economy is not doing well, to say the least. They are seeing a situation right now where they haven't had the internet for over 2 months, except if you are part of the regime. So that limits their ability to do basic commerce to move their economy forward. So the Americans' hope is that this blockade has such an impact on them, on the Iranians, that they have to come back to the negotiation table. Now, of course, it goes both sides. We've seen oil spikes in the Brent oil numbers at over $113 per barrel. We see in America that the price per gallon of gas is well over $4 right now. So both sides are hurting. The hope by the Trump administration is that so much pressure is put on the Iranian regime for their ability to conduct basic government functions. Millions of people in Iran are moving towards poverty. They're having a difficult time just paying for food.
Right.
And that puts enough pressure on to bring them to the table back to Islamabad, or at least on the telephone, to talk real issues about a long-term ceasefire.
You talked about this working both ways. How much pressure is Donald Trump under domestically, and has he written off the midterms now?
So I think there's significant pressure on Mr. Trump. Of course, he has elections coming up in November. Right now, his political party is behind quite significantly in the battle for who controls the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. At the same time, he is also a president who looks at the gas price and takes pride in the fact that it's lower, it was anyway, than before he took office, and that the stock market is up, unemployment is down, inflation is steady. He looks at those markers and he sees that as his internal report card. Right now, the main thing we've seen is that increase in in gas prices that has caused millions of dollars in added money that has to be spent out of our economy for higher gas prices, and that's going to have a long-term effect on supply chains. We saw one U.S. small airline go under this past weekend, partially because of an increase in jet fuel. So it is having an impact. But at this point, he has stayed very strident in his public messaging about this war and continues to focus on Iran and continual messages to hopefully bring them to the table.
All right, Mark Feifley, thanks very much indeed for that. Thank you. All right, well, next up, it's This is America, bringing you deeper insight into the debates and conversations shaping America and indeed the world.
This is America, and America's war effort in Iran is starting to raise questions over the long-term impact and unintended consequences of the conflict. I'll be back a little later in the program with more on that. But to start us off, here's Cyril Venier from our Washington studio.
Manuel Rapallo, thank you. The U.S. is the world's military superpower, and it uses that power often to remove a foreign leader, fight an enemy, take out a perceived threat. The American ability to project force around the globe remains unmatched. But what happens after the guns go silent? And then after that? Today's show is about the second and third order consequences of U.S. foreign policy, the knock-on effects that become apparent over time. Another way of asking this, 10 years from now, when we look back at how the U.S. war in Iran ultimately shaped the Middle East and the world, what will we see? The U.S. has a long history of using its strength or intelligence capabilities to change the trajectory of other countries and their people, setting off a chain of events with unforeseeable consequences. Patty Culhane reports.
Please. The U.S. didn't try to hide its support for the Mujahideen in its fight against the Soviet Union. President Ronald Reagan welcomed them to the White House, labeled them freedom fighters. The U.S. did give generously to the Mujahideen. That included Arabs, hundreds of millions of dollars of advanced military hardware, training, and intelligence. But the support came with a price. Years of civil war and eventually Taliban rule, who harbored Osama bin Laden, responsible for the 9/11 attacks. The U.S. responded by invading Afghanistan. But President George Bush did not prepare the nation for a war that would last nearly 20 years, only to see the Taliban sweep back into power. During the war between Iraq and Iran, the U.S. quietly sided with Iraq, providing military support and intelligence to Saddam Hussein and his military, only to later secretly sell arms to Iran in order to fund rebels in Nicaragua, a scandal that came to be known as the Iran-Contra affair. But in 2003, the U.S. once again focused on its short-term goal in Iraq, ousting Saddam Hussein. Baghdad quickly fell, and a few months later, President Bush landed on an aircraft carrier to declare major operations over.
Major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed. And now our coalition is engaged in securing and reconstructing that country.
But an insurgency meant the war would drag on, and U.S. troops would leave almost 9 years later.